This isn't that big a deal. Trust me. Everyone's been going crazy for some reason just because LaMarcus Aldridge signed to the Nets. Excuse me. This is a guy that put up 13 points and 4.5 rebounds in 21 games for the San Antonio Spurs. And now because he goes to Brooklyn, it's a super team? Come on now, be better than this. But no, for real, beyond that, there are actually some valid reasons as to why LaMarcus Aldridge with the Nets doesn't really move the needle. In fact, if anything, it might be making them worse. Yes, that's right. But before we get onto that, I want to talk about accountability real quick. This is not Kevin Durant trying to get himself to an easy ring. This is not James Harden trying to bolster, or Kyrie Irving or whoever trying to bolster firepower. This is an organization that is trying its best to win a championship. And if that means you're going to sign some 35-year-old power forward who had success in the past in order to make you better, so be it. It's just business. If there's anything to blame in this whole sequence of events, you might want to direct your attention to the buyout system. The fact that a bought out player can go to any team that he likes and simply signing a minimum salary while retaining his own, that seems sort of suspect, don't you think? So in true James Harden fashion, you should hate the game, not the player. Okay, so now with all that out the way, let's talk about logistics now and how this doesn't really help them. So number one, let's look at offense. So LaMarcus Aldridge is a multiple-time All-Star, a multiple-time All-NBA finalist, and was a supreme offensive force for many years. The logic is, since now he's signed with the Brooklyn Nets, he has less pressure and is able to truly draw out all of his offensive talents yet again on Brooklyn to make them even more OP than before. But how much more OP can you get when you have 3 of the top 10, if not top 5, scorers of all time? Yeah, I mean, top 5 is the debate to be had. For sports, I think there's a limit on how much talent you can have versus the amount of output that you can have on the court or the field or whatever. And it sort of looks like a logarithmic curve. At some point in time, with a certain amount of talent level, the output just flattens out, or it's so negligible that it really didn't matter if you did it in the first place. So basically what I'm saying is, if you've already got an insane offensive talent, adding one more offensive talent to that, it's really not gonna do much when you've got the limited constraints that is the basketball game. It's safe to say that Brooklyn's pretty much maxed out their potential over there, but they've got other areas that they still have serious problems with. And it's no little thing, it's 50% of the entire game. Defense. Historically, the 2 teams that end up in the NBA Finals have at least a top 10 defense. The Nets right now are not a top 10 defense. In fact, they're 26th in defensive rating right now in all the teams of the NBA. And if you look down their roster, there's really no salvation anywhere. DeAndre Jordan is a washed version of himself. He has no verticality. He's not able to move or be versatile in any type way. Joe Harris. Kevin Durant, of course, is coming off an Achilles injury, and Kyrie and James Harden have their own reputations for defense that, aren't necessarily positive. It's safe to say that some of their best defenders right now were G-Leaguers last year. Not the greatest sign that you're doing something good. And adding LaMarcus Aldridge. Doesn't help your defense. As a 35-year-old, somewhat washed power forward, now he's gonna be a center. He's the epitome of who you do not want guarding Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo in the playoffs. He's lost a bunch of his athleticism, if he even had any in the first place. His verticality is hardly there. He can't move from side to side. And just overall a bad scene on defense. Now, you could argue his bench scoring all you like. You could argue that he's going to dominate against backup bigs. You can argue that he's the crucial 10 to 20 points that they would need in some crucial game or whatever. But at the end of the day, the Nets needed defense. They did not need offense, and especially not in the form of LaMarcus Aldridge. He doesn't really make them that much better in the regular season, and in the playoffs, if it were not for his experience, I think that he'd be on the bench. Alright, here's another interesting stat for you. In the past 20 years, out of all the NBA champions, the lowest ranked NBA defense was the 2001 Los Angeles Lakers. They were ranked 23rd. Then they went on to have one of the greatest playoff runs in NBA history. Guess what their defense was ranked? Number 1. That 2001 Lakers team had Shaq and Kobe. This 2021 Nets team has Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. They have the star power to do it, but do they have the defensive prowess? That's the question to be answered here, and LaMarcus doesn't help it. In fact, you could legitimately argue that it would be better if he hadn't gone at all. But you can't blame him for it. You can't blame Blake for it either. I mean, they had some horrible situations. Remember when Blake Griffin was promised by the Clippers that he would be spending his whole career there, then was dumped off to Detroit in some random trade. Then from there had to deal with injuries and the Pistons' entire front office full of incompetence. Now finally you're able to be free after 2-3 years of this horrible NBA existence, and you're given a choice of where to go. What would you do? And then what about LaMarcus Aldridge, who in 2015 left Portland to leave Dame by himself because he wanted to go win a championship? And he got real close to it too if Zaza Pachulia hadn't stepped on Kawhi Leonard's foot. Then Kawhi leaves, gets his own championship, and now you're stuck with a rebuilding team at 35 years old, putting up all-star seasons like it's nothing, with absolutely nowhere to go. Now you're stuck. When you and Greg Popovich mutually agree to part ways, where do you think you're going? After years of trying to get a ring in San Antonio with Greg Popovich and you had Kawhi and all that, after toiling years in Portland, and now you have a decision of wherever you want to go. And there happens to be a certain player who's a fellow Texas Longhorn, straight out of your college, that you can go team up with and win a ring almost guaranteed in your first year. Again, I ask, what would you do? And even think of it on the flip side. As an organization, you're the Brooklyn Nets. You have a chance to sign Blake Griffin because he's interested. You have a chance to sign LaMarcus Aldridge because he's interested. What would you do? Is that something to hate them for? Is that something to hate them for being great? For being so great of a franchise that you can now get players to come to you after years of being sold out by the Knicks? Come on now. And let me give you guys a fun fact. This all happened because Kyrie Irving was a New Jersey Nets fan as a child. That's the whole reason it happened. If you want a video on it, I can make a whole domino effect video if you want me to, because it's huge. Comment down below. And while you're at it, like the video. Now, this might feel like it's the Warriors all over again, acquiring pieces and becoming a super team and all that. But no, this is different. I can tell you as a reformed Warriors hater and as a Houston Rockets fan that this is something that I feel that I can root for. I know that sounds weird. But hear me out. The Brooklyn Nets have done nothing but try to make themselves a respectable franchise. Back when they got botched by the 2014 Nets trade, they had to scrape all the way from the bottom. Sean Marks had to come all the way up in order to make himself a respectable franchise. One that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, two of the top players in the NBA, if not in NBA history, took notice of and decided to make that their playground. You can't blame them for that. You can't blame them for trading for James Harden in a stupid trade. You could blame Blake and LaMarcus, but now really, could you? While everyone is saying that this is a horrible trade, this is something that should have never really gone down, this is unfair to the NBA, I think this is something to celebrate. Because you've got a whole band of misfits, guys that have chips on their shoulders for certain reasons. Harden getting a championship, Kyrie with LeBron, KD with the Warriors. Now you got LaMarcus and Blake in there as well, and DeAndre Jordan as well. These guys all have chips on their shoulders in some way or another, and now all basically a band of NBA misfits together on one team, under a spectacular organization, I might add. But all this feeling good or getting angry or whatever else you're feeling doesn't really matter unless they can improve their defense. You could get Michael Jordan right now, 40-year-old Michael Jordan, and it wouldn't even matter. You could get Thanos. But if he didn't know how to play defense, it wouldn't matter. So please, to those who were, stop overreacting about a former all-star joining a team for a bench role, who probably won't even get minutes in the playoffs. But anyway, that's all I gotta say on the topic. If you liked the video, make sure you do the obvious thing, and I'm gonna see you next time. Thanks for watching.